Also, I think donations started flowing in much more slower at this time. These are actually like shackles that hold them back from achieving what they want to achieve in life. They say that this is something shameful, don't talk about it, don't let anyone know you are going through this, etc., etc.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowering Convos. I am Shwetha Rajesh, a high school junior and an interviewer at Empower, and today we are joined by Adrija Jana, and we will be speaking about period poverty and menstrual stigma and the implications on the same. Adrija, could you please introduce yourself for our audience?
Definitely. Hello, everybody. I'm Adrija Jana. I'm currently a grade 12 humanities student. I'm an avid reader and I enjoy interacting with people and making new friends. I have also recently started a new magazine called Visions Inside Out, which explores conflicts and lifestyles of various people. And apart from that, I'm a nature lover and I love spending my time in social services. I think that's more than enough about me.
Definitely, I am a reader too, and so I can relate with you on that. So let's start today's conversation with telling our audience what period poverty and menstrual stigma exactly is, in case there's anyone who doesn't really know about it.
Definitely. So, at the outset, period poverty and menstrual stigma are interrelated and both arise from a lack of awareness about what menstruation actually is about. Menstruation is like a normal bodily phenomenon, like we have to digest, like we have to breathe. It is just like that. Just that menstruation is not necessary for your survival, but that doesn't mean it is something from another planet that we need to keep under covers or be hush hush about. Menstrual stigma is when you treat menstruation like a taboo and you shut down all discussion around it, either because of social constructs or because of misconceptions and superstitions. And period poverty is when largely menstruators cannot get access to period products and other resources during their monthly cycle, which leads them to having to bear with unhygienic substances and circumstances.
I think definitely menstrual stigma is such a huge problem that we've all been around, I think, since we were very young. Like, I personally remember how whenever my teacher had to speak something about periods or menstruation, she always used to say, okay, all the boys can go out of the class now. I have to speak something secret to the girls. And it's
Very
just so weird. I think as women, we're so used for like it being such a like just a normal part of our everyday lives, and like someone else comes and makes it such a huge deal to speak about. It's really weird for us, I think. And so, I mean, obviously, as we just discussed, menstruation is such a simple thing and it's not really anything to be stigmatized. But why do you think that so many people hold so much stigma against it?
Yeah, exactly. So see, it is because of the beliefs that have existed from our society since I think times immemorial. It has become very difficult to emphasize that menstruation is something simple, and more importantly, it is something normal. It is needed if you need to ensure the survival of the human species, first of all. This can actually be associated with the efforts that have been made for centuries to suppress women, saying that women become impure during this time and that this is a taboo topic, is yet another excuse to not to allow them to just go out and pursue their dreams or live their lives as they wish to. And it's not just about women, it is about everybody who is a menstruator. It applies to all of them. They say that this is something shameful, don't talk about it, don't let anyone know you are going through this, etc., etc. And those of us who are in a privileged position, we might think that all of this is in the past, but actually, it is still a very, very real problem in our society.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about whether you think that it's still prevalent in the day and age, but I think you answered that as well, which I think I myself am also very passionate about period poverty, and I follow lots of entrepreneurs like Aditi Gupta, the founder of Menstrupedia, and all of them. And I think like what you said about how most of us who are now in a very privileged space to have access to education and the internet and technology and everything, we just tend to not think that, these kind of problems still exist, but definitely there are such problems still existing.
As I as I keep saying again and again, menstrual stigma and period poverty, they very much still exist. Believe it or not, they are still detriments to the dreams and experiences of so many menstruators out there. These are actually like shackles that hold them back from achieving what they want to achieve in life.
Definitely. I myself see so many examples, sometimes even in the news. And it's kind of scary to hear that a person could be discriminated against simply because of their biological cycles. But I suppose we should only slowly take action towards changing that. Now, both of us are from India, and in a country like India, if you see, most of the stigma surrounding menstruation and periods stems from superstitions, which is very deeply rooted in our culture. Do you think it's possible for us to make like the generations of people who have learned this unlearn these lessons?
You're absolutely right. It is true that these superstitions are rooted in our culture. But for every generation, and not just for every generation, but for every individual, there is a choice. For example, when 8 years back I had my menarche or the beginning of my menstrual cycle, there was no one to explain to me how and why changes were happening in my body. My mother was hesitant because she had been brought up amidst the belief that menstruation was a taboo topic, and so had my grandmother and everybody else before them. They chose to pass those beliefs down. But my generation was more fortunate, our generation that is, in the sense that reproductive education became more accessible and reproductive education became more progressive in our time. So in grade 8, I came to know the real reason and the real process behind menstruation. Now that I'm aware, of course, I would choose not to pass on the superstitions to my future generations, right? Another problem is that back then the LGBTQIA plus community did not have much recognition, and it was believed that only women can menstruate. As a result, anyone who was assigned male at birth was totally deprived of menstrual awareness, and even if they somehow came to know of it later in their life, they avoided the topic like the plague. Like they had to avoid the topic like the plague in the way it was constructed. Now, though, the reproductive education is gender inclusive, and thank God for that. So, this is how we can break the chain. We can choose what to learn, what to unlearn, what to pass on, and what to leave behind. It is a choice that we all can do.
I can definitely agree with you because I also firmly believe that education can change a lot of things, and everything that we do, like you said, we do have a choice to choose to do right or wrong. And like you were saying, for me too, personally, when I first started, I honestly, no one had spoken to me about it before, and I still remember the first day I got it. I had digestive issues a lot as a kid, and I just had stomach pain, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is nothing. I came home, I used the washroom, and I was shocked and utterly scared about what was going on in my body. And only then did like people around me think of telling me that this is something that I would go through in my life. Half of the knowledge that I initially got about this would be from watching YouTube videos where at that point I think in YouTube it was such a trend to make like my period essentials kit videos, or like what I would tell my little sister about periods. And as someone who did not have older siblings, it was sort of what saved me, and most of that actually came from like abroad. I think in the US and other countries like that, it has progressed a lot more here than India, which is understandable considering US is more of a developed country. But I think here, especially in India, it's still very scary to talk about it. And even learning it in science, I remember my teacher rushing through the whole reproduction chapter, like as if it's something that should not be
Yeah,
spoken about, which I think almost everyone in our audience can you know, relate to. And I think also we grew up learning that you'll have that chapter called reproduction, and you should be very scared of that chapter, and everyone just gets so weird around that chapter. But like you said, I think it's definitely possible, if not easy, to change the things we've learned. And
I
so
agree. And being Indian girls, I think we can safely agree that this is not yours or my story, but the story of every other menstruator out there. We have all gone through this.
definitely. And another thing that you said that I have to definitely agree on is how much more inclusive to the LGBT community that awareness has become. Because I mean, there are still so many people who like interchangeably use women and menstruators, or like biological women and menstruators, as if only women menstruate, and that's obviously not true. But I think a lot more awareness has come about now, which is again a very great thing and a testament to how progressive we as a whole world, in fact, are becoming. And now, I mean, we are living in the times of COVID 19, and I know that COVID 19 has affected period poverty in some way or another. How would you say that it has affected it?
Right now at this point, it would be difficult to find any aspect about anything that has not been affected by COVID. So
That's
yeah, it has
true.
had an effect on period poverty too. The interesting thing is that it has had opposite effects on menstrual stigma and period poverty. So like during the pandemic, when all operations and systems they became online, period activism groups and movements that were already there, they formerly had a small reach. But now they were able to reach out to a larger audience and conduct more educational sessions and campaigns. This menstrual awareness saw a growth, especially among teenagers, young adults, and other people who were active on social media. And this also empowered many people to speak of menstruation without fear. At the same time, this COVID-19 adversely affected the finances of various families, especially in India, the lower income group families. The economically disadvantaged people were already the ones who were more skeptical about investing in period products, even before the pandemic. And when the pandemic created a situation where even feeding the family became difficult, we can understand that naturally sanitation and purchasing period products became the least of their concerns. Also, I think donations started flowing in much more slower at this time. So, because of this, as you can see, it had a positive effect on awareness about menstruation to some extent. At the same time, it had a very adverse effect on period poverty, or actually being able to use period products during the monthly cycle. But yes, in this regard, there are some organizations out there like the Period Society, which I'm a part of. We spoke about Aditi Gupta right in the beginning. They are doing exemplary work both in spreading awareness and in raising funds to abolish period poverty.
I think that's really great. I think, like you said, period poverty and like stigma surrounding periods has obviously been around for the longest time. Like the thing you said about period poverty and like people not willing to buy sanitary products. I think that's how Aditi Gupta herself got inspired to begin Menstrupedia, because she came from a very conservative family where they thought that buying period products is literally a shame to the family to be caught with it, which we still see these days. If you go to a pharmacy and then they'll put it in a brown bag or black bag and they'll be like, hello, madam, chupke se. And that's that's there. And I think another, like you said, I do think that menstrual stigma has like bettered a bit during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. One way that I personally have seen it is, so like during the COVID-19 pandemic, most of us have been confined to our homes, including our fathers and brothers and all of that. And for me personally, I find that my father has become a lot more empathetic and understanding after spending literally 2 years with me and watching me go through all the pain and discomfort and everything that comes with periods. He's become much more understanding and empathetic to what being like what during that time of the month what I go through and how he can be better, whereas usually he would not understand why I was irritable or what was happening, which I think in a way like being forced to spend time with others has also taught us about it as well.
So I will share an experience. So for me, menstrual cramps are very, very bad. It is literally like hell. It's like I'm about to die. So what I do is I have a plastic bottle that is like my personal teddy bear by now, and I fill it with warm water and I use it as a hot pack to relieve the cramps. And my brother, the young person he's very, very curious about, how exactly the bottle can help relieve something that is going on inside my body. And so yeah, that was another way of spreading the awareness as the, this and this and that. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you said.
I can definitely relate to you as well about the pain. Um, okay, another question is something that probably our audience can reflect on is how do you think that we can take steps towards reducing stigma around menstruation and what we as just, normal people can do to help the situations?
Right. It is often said that change begins with you. This is something that I believe in very, very strongly. The first step is to sensitize ourselves before we can do anything for anyone else. We need to be aware of what we are talking about. Next is that we can take small steps in our daily lives towards destigmatizing periods. We do not always need to do something big and phenomenal, quote unquote, to make an impact. Small actions like encouraging conversations, like we just now spoke about, passing on information to interested peers and juniors, and keeping an open mind can go a long way in ensuring that menstrual stigma does not pose a danger to the society anymore. Finally, whenever possible, help out. Choose to volunteer, support the campaign, or raise funds for the cause. Look out for ways in which you can get involved in the movement, and remember that this movement is gender inclusive. So, I, for one, am a poet, and I choose to support the movement through my creative pieces and through my research. So, no matter what you do, no matter what you like to do, you can always direct it to support a cause you're passionate about. The world needs you out there. So just get out there and get going.
Definitely agree. I think that art is such an impactful way of spreading awareness. I know that there are some artists which may sound icky to some people, but use period blood for their art. And there are some people who make jewelry, like with like the uterus and things like that into consideration. And that definitely, though, in first glance, there may be so many people who think of it as that's like disgusting. Why would someone do that? But that's such an effective way to spread like awareness, especially because I feel like art is something that is such a huge part of our lives. Like everything almost we see has art in it. Like we open Instagram, I'm sure all of us follow at least one or two artists subconsciously or poets, and poetry too. I myself am also a poet, so I agree that I know how strong poetry can be and how some like I have personally been like influenced so much by one poem, though I don't remember who it was by or the name. It was about menstruation and the stigma surrounding it and that person's experience with their um, life growing up in a very conservative family. And it was a spoken word poetry. And it was something that I listened to, I think, 2, 3 years ago, and I was deeply touched by it. So I think, and like you said, I think the easiest way for us to like do something, do our part is to start small and small things like you know that I don't remember the exact quote, but like a small ripple can cause a wave or yeah. So
Right.
definitely and do you think that it would help if the government intervenes and comes up with some policies regarding period poverty?
I think you would agree that period poverty is something that has received very little to no attention in Indian policymaking. So, being an Indian, I believe you and everybody in our audience would agree with me on that point. So I think now we are at a point where we need progressive policy to combat period poverty. The NGOs are doing their best, but governmental support is always welcome. The government should definitely consider subsidizing the period products industry so that everybody can afford period products without like straining their finances further. And hopefully sustainable period products can also be afforded by everyone in future if the government considers subsidizing. At the same time, the government should also take an initiative of conducting awareness sessions or supporting the campaigns that have already been started by dedicated and passionate individuals and groups. It is high time that we normalize menstruation. Period.
Definitely. I think one thing that I can remember about government intervention in India with period poverty or stigma in general is so again for our global viewers, I'll give a little bit of context. So, in India, in the movie theaters, almost before every movie, we have a video that plays which tells us how injurious smoking is, which used to be the biggest thing for a long time. But I think around 5 or 6 years ago, there was a huge change in the smoking advertisement slash infographic video that the government put forth, where it was not just telling you not to smoke, but there's a really famous actor here in India called Akshay Kumar who acted in this advertisement which told this man who was smoking that instead of spending money on cigarettes, not only is he killing himself, he's also killing his wife by not providing her with sanitary products. So that advertisement spoke about the importance of sanitary products and napkins for women, and I think that was such a refreshing step and a change to see in like the progression that we as a country or as the world in general are moving towards. And I think another question that I have for you, which I'm pretty sure you will be able to relate, because all of us have heard of some myth or something that's so stupid to us surrounding periods. And, like, when we think of it, we think it's quite senseless, but there are so many people who really believe in it. What is something that you can think of?
Okay, at the outset, I'm very sorry, but I have to speak about two myths and not just one because I feel like it is
Sure.
very important to get it out there. The first one, during menstruation, women become impure. But like, oh my God, this is literally something that is still believed out there. Menstrual blood is labeled as impure, and menstruators are prevented from going inside the kitchen, entering places of worship. You must remember the big movement in the South about menstruators being allowed to enter the temples. No, or just literally menstruators being a part of any auspicious events during menstruation is forbidden. I mean, first of all, anything that can give life, how can it be impure? Secondly, we all know that menstrual blood comes from the breakdown of the uterine wall during the monthly ovulation cycle if the egg does not get fertilized. So the fact whether this blood is pure or impure should not be discussed at all because it is a part of our body like blood from any other part of the body. Second myth, only women menstruate. No, that is not true. You must have noticed that throughout the entire conversation, I have tried to use the term menstruators and not women. So traditionally, it has been believed that only women menstruate, which is again an effect of the binary gender system that only recognizes men and women and existed for a very, very long time. But now that we are building an inclusive community and the LGBTQIA plus community is finally getting recognition, I think we should know that menstruation is related to the reproductive system and not to your gender. What gender you identify with does not decide if you menstruate or not. For example, many trans people, gender diverse people, and other queer individuals also menstruate. Hence, the term menstruator was coined as it is more inclusive. Thus, we need to be sensitive and empathic at the very least, and instead of judging, as I mentioned before, we need to keep an open mind going forward.
These are both two myths that I definitely come across in my daily life, especially the first one, because I still, like my grandparents, still believe that you shouldn't cook or go to the kitchen or touch clothes, which is so weird. But in my house, they say that you shouldn't even touch clothes when you're on your periods. And the temple thing, even my mother does still believe that like religious places should not be visited
Right.
when you are on your period, which again, I really don't understand, but I wouldn't want to argue, so I usually just go along with it, only the religious one. But, and then, the second thing that you said as well about not everyone who menstruates is a woman, I think a quote that I can remember related to that is not all women menstruate and not all menstruators are women, which I think is something that we should all definitely be keeping in mind. A myth that I have heard, or like it's a very funny thing that I have heard, which some I don't even remember who told me, but it was ages ago, and someone told me that if someone on their periods stares at you, you will get cursed. It's like an evil eye, and that was so confusing for me. And I'm like, now we're talking about magic, we're talking about voodoo, we've brought all of that into periods when it's literally just something so natural as using the toilet, which no one says that when someone has to use the toilet, if they look at you, you will get cursed, which Thinking of it is
Yeah.
so absurd. I I literally can't even fathom how someone would think of something like that. But I suppose that's why all of us are trying to bring awareness to this topic now and abolish such silly things.
Yeah, so I'll just share a small anecdote from my life. So I said that in my family, especially, menstruators are not allowed to like attend any auspicious events while they're menstruating. So I believe you know about Bhai Phota, which is like Bhai Dooj, a very famous festival where the sister will pray for the brother's well-being and give a chandan ka tika on that forehead in that festival. That is only allowed once the brothers or the bhais they turn 5. So the year my brother turned 5 when he was supposed to have his first Bhai Dooj, I was on like that very day I got on my period. Okay. And my mother, my grandmother, my entire family was against me like being a part of that celebration because they felt that it would bring bad luck to my brother. But my brother is one headstrong child. If I do not give the first Bhai Dooj ka photo to him, he will not take it from anybody else. He was adamant. So like I went there, I sat down and did not listen to anybody, and I gave him the tika and everything. And I think that was what 5 years back, and my brother and I, both of us are healthy and well, and here right now and doing like everything. So yeah,
I think, yeah, so I see that, which I think a very funny thing that I find, especially in India, or many cultures as well, I've heard of, is that a woman, when she attains age or starts her periods, they make a whole deal out of it. And there's like, at least in my tradition where I'm from, there's a whole puja, or that means like a celebration, a
yeah,
religious celebration,
yeah.
and a huge deal is made out of it. And I remember reading about some other cultures, not just Indian as well, who do the same. And it's so funny how when the girl, women, or whoever is starting their menstruation first starts it, we make such a huge deal about it. And then the second that is over, we start spreading such weird propaganda, like if you touch them, they will curse you, and such funny things like that. And it's so funny to see how the tables turn almost like within a snap of our fingers.
I agree. I remember that when I started, like I was on a vacation when I started. I was immediately like brought back home, and there was this entire puja at home where I had to take, I don't know, it's called gomutra or the cow's urine. There was a puja and all of that. I had to take that with some other mixed materials, and all of that huge stuff happened. And after that, I mean, it
Yeah,
doesn't make sense.
it definitely does not. I think that's like a testament to how, if we want to be like more open and more positive towards menstruation, we can be, but maybe we just choose not to, and we should really come away from that mindset.
Yeah.
Would you like to add something to conclude today's conversation?
Just that there are many people out there who want to advocate for this cause, but they are afraid of the critique of the society, and that is okay. Take your time, gauge the situation around you, read about this more, see about more people who are taking action, and when you're ready, step forward and raise your voice. Do not let anybody or anything stop you from raising your voice, because that is the one thing that none of us should ever have to face. When you're ready, put yourself out there, raise your voice, and just go for the movement. You can do it.
Definitely agreed. I'm sure that all of us can join together and hopefully change everything surrounding menstrual stigma and period poverty sometime in the near future. That would be amazing. This was such an eye opening and wonderful and really, in fact, fun conversation for me to have, Adrija. Thank you so much for uh, doing this empowering conversation with us. I hope you enjoyed this experience as much as I did.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.